Good morning. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to the Billing, Payment, and Credit Enhancement Stakeholder Call to discuss the draft tariff language, which was posted on September 9th. My name is Elena Kopolova-Alford, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm joined on the call by Dan Schonkweiler, Assistant General Counsel, Denise Walsh, our Controller, Dennis Estrada, Assistant Controller, Christina Billing, Lead Treasury and Credit Analyst, and Jacqueline Meredith, Senior Tariff Specialist. So before we get started, just a quick reminder, this presentation and other related materials, including that draft tariff language, are available on the Billing, Payment, and Credit Enhancements Initiative page. You can get to that page by going to kaiso.com, navigating to the Stakeholder Center tab at the top, and selecting Policy Initiatives. That's going to take you to our main initiatives landing page. And there you can either search at the top or scroll through to find Billing, Payment, and Credit Enhancements page, and the latest documents will be at the top of that page. I'm going to go over a couple housekeeping reminders before we get started with our call. So this is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And the meetings are intended to stimulate open dialogue and encourage different perspectives. Please keep comments professional and respectful, and try to be brief and refrain from repeating what's already been said so we can manage the time efficiently. If you need technical assistance during the meeting, please send a chat to Insular Events. That is our event producer, and her name is Stacy. To raise your hand, make sure you open the participant and chat panels on the bottom right so you can see chat and you can see other attendees and panelists. To raise your hand, if you connected to the audio through your computer or use the Call Me option, you can select the raise hand icon at the bottom of that participant panel that you open. If you dialed in outside of WebEx, you can press *3 to get into the question queue. Please remember to state your name and affiliation anytime you are making a comment or a question. And you can send your chat questions to either me, Elena Kopolova-Alford, or to all panelists. Here's where we are in this process. This was board approved last November, and we're now reviewing the draft tariff language, and we'll be working on filing on October 10th or 11th. And I'm going to pass it over to Dan from here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elena. Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining, for reviewing already or planning to review this tariff language carefully, and thanks for your patience while we took the time to really try to get this right and catch all the improvements that we need. This is our agenda for this morning. I don't expect our presentation to take long. I am hoping there are questions we can answer or topics to discuss. We're going to go through, we're going to begin with this introduction and background and some reminders about the underlying business processes, sort of in the nature of mental calisthenics to get us thinking about this. And then really we're just going to talk about a few of the topics. I don't intend at all to review every proposed change, but talk about how we implemented these, see if these prompt questions, and those relate to clarifying the difference between settlements and billing, or some reorganization of Section 11, the new section, proposed new Section 1129.2, where a single agreement will govern all settlement, billing, and payment by a market participant that has more than one relevant agreement. And then we'll ask if there are questions about any other changes or other topics, revisions, and then go on to talk about next steps, including phase 2. As I hinted at just a moment ago, most of these changes, we think, subject to hearing the questions, are straightforward enough that and understandable on their face that it just doesn't seem productive to review each one of these individually. So we're going to talk about the thinking behind the changes that are most common and most repeated throughout to make sure you can see or understand what we were thinking when we made these changes, and review the new rule about one contract, and then we'll open the call up to address questions you have about any of the other changes. Let's remind ourselves, we've got here with me, as we're Yelena introduced, we've got Denise Walsh and Dennis Estrada, who can, and Christina Billing in credit, who can talk about the underlying business processes, but let's talk about them. The core of these, not all the changes, but most of them relate to the payment process that happens every week, and in particular, what happens in the unusual situation where either a market participant doesn't pay or files for bankruptcy or both. So remember, invoices and payment advices are issued every Wednesday, not to all participants, but to participants who have agreements where they participate financially. These cover a range of settlement statements over the last few weeks or longer periods ago as specified on the payments calendar. Payment is due 6 calendar days later, the following Tuesday, and assuming all invoices are paid in full, Dennis, who's sitting here with me, sends everything out to all of you, and it's another normal week, and all is well. Our focus is on occasions where there is a payment default, where on Tuesday Dennis doesn't receive, and the ISO doesn't receive everything we should. Now, even if there is a payment default, the market creditors, that is the participants that are due that week, may be paid in full. That still may work, and it often does. The primary protections are the collateral that market participants post for our use in these situations, although I'm going to note that even though there's collateral in a bankruptcy situation, we may not be able to access that collateral right away legally. Otherwise, and in addition to collateral, we have a multiple reserve accounts that in some occasions, cover cash flow temporarily while we're collecting. And we also use certain collection strategies in the event of bankruptcy to try to collect as quickly as possible and not need bankruptcy court permission to use collateral. What happens, a reminder, because it hasn't happened in 20 years, 22 years, 3 years. Dennis, we're going on 23 years.
Wow.
Yeah. What happens if there aren't sufficient funds to pay market creditors? The general rule is in 1129.17.1. There are 2 steps, and these steps they're somewhat legacy. They were somewhat created in a settlement that was entered around 2011, may have become effective in 2012. I don't remember exactly. But the first step is to just clear the market that Tuesday by shorting creditors. The entities that are due money, they get shorted pro rata. Then step 2, and this is part of the settlement from 12 years ago, to allocate the losses in a more fair way. The short to the creditors is reallocated to the broader market, including debtors. So all market participants, even if your entity is often or usually a debtor on any given Tuesday, you could be allocated part of the loss. And then the ISO pursues collection on behalf of the market and may or may not collect everything that's due. Someday we may not. Last slide on the refresher, terminology around default. Insolvency is a financial term. Bankruptcy is a legal proceeding. They don't necessarily mean the same thing. A market participant that's in bankruptcy court may not be insolvent. And, well, I'm not going to pick on people or firms, but this actually happened. If you follow public events, there's a big public figure who filed for personal bankruptcy recently who's got some indirect connections to the energy industry, and the bankruptcy court said, you're not insolvent, and they sent him out of that, although that's not necessarily a requirement for corporations. Second thing, an insolvent market participant may not file for bankruptcy, and we've had that several times. Some small market participants just shut down and stop operating. So bankruptcy, really, you think of it as a solution for insolvency, but the most important thing in bankruptcy is the automatic stay, and that's what can prevent us from accessing the property of the bankruptcy estate, which is sometimes the collateral that's posted, and that can result in a delay of payment even if we're holding sufficient collateral. So some of the changes we're talking about are designed to address that situation and try to get the market paid on time rather than late. So of the core revisions here that I just want to review and get people thinking about, the first is by far the most extensive change here, which is to clarify the tariff terminology to distinguish settlement from billing. This is explained in section 5.4, the draft final proposal. I think the meaning is clear enough right now in the tariff, or maybe I should say not enough. I think it's clear because section 1129 talks about how payment works, and it's somebody who really sat down and studied it would understand the difference. That doesn't mean it's as clear as we want it to be if there were ever, somebody really wanted to argue about it, and there's also other value to clarity here. Settlement is an accounting exercise, and so settlements is not about payment. An entity that's credited, that provides, say, ancillary services and gets a settlement credit for that, isn't necessarily going to be paid. They may end up a net debtor. There are all kinds of other functions related to the payment process I just outlined where they may not be paid, and they certainly won't be paid that exact amount. That's not what's going to happen. And so we have substituted in, for clarity, accounting terminology, debit, credit, revenue, and a few other things. When we see the word pay and it's not used in a context where money actually changes hand in that amount. One thing we didn't do is change defined terms. That didn't seem necessary, and unnecessary confusion and things like that. So you'll see in Appendix A, terms like no pay have survived this edit, or at least that was our intent in all of those changes. You see, I think, let's stop here. This would be a good time. Are there any questions about this well, otherwise minor but quite extensive set of the rewrites? Are there any comments, or this would be, we can of course come back to this later, but Elena, is there anyone raising their hand or inserting themselves in the chat here?
There's currently no hands raised, and there's no questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it.
Sure, yep, and thank you. Happy to talk about this one later too. Second general topic is the reorganization of Section 11. As we, let me see. So there are comments in the Section 11 document to try to make these moves transparent, but we really had to read this from beginning to end. You saw that it became apparent there were a number of sections that would be hard to find because if somebody were coming at this fresh, because they aren't where they should be. They aren't with their neighbors. And I put up on the slide here roughly the structure of Section 11. You go into 11.1, it's got some general principles about both settlement and billing and payment. Then there's extensive changes. Most of Section 11.2 or 11.3 through 11.28 are settlements. In the middle of settlement, somewhere around 11.18, 11.19, you've got NERC-WEC charges and FERC fees. These are charges that are actually invoiced outside the normal payment process. And there are a couple of them clustered together, settlements is resumed, and then you get to 11.29, which begins with general principles of billing and payment, then quickly shifts to settlement statements and their production and the timeline and correction. Then you get around 11.29.8, you get to disputes, but then around 11.29.10, you get to the payment process, and then 11.29, somewhere before 17, you get to payment defaults. And these are, and within these, there are subtopics. We did everything we could to try to move like provisions together, and this will both, it's designed, I apologize if you've got links to your favorite provisions here. I hope nobody's got favorite provisions in this section, but what I hope is this will reduce the chances that someday somebody will come in from outside and try to find all the provisions on a certain topic, see everything, read everything in that area, and miss something that's quite related but in a different section of this 200 or 300 page section 11. So that was the point of that reorganization. Oh, here we go. Otherwise, I should say, if to the extent we made any changes to provisions we moved, they are described, indicated, or summarized in the comment bubbles. Otherwise, the language was moved, just copied and pasted, and the only thing that was changed was the section number. I'd also say we ran out of room for this. I mean, it's easy to see why this happened over time because there's not much real estate in section 11. And so we can see potential to do more of this in phase 2. If you have thoughts one way or the other, either email me or include it in your comments, whether you think this is worthwhile or excessively frustrating. Elena, yes, or comments, again, let me know, or questions. Last substantive section to review. This is the new rule about one provision, one contract. So this new rule applies when one market participant, as is often the case, has more than one agreement with the ISO that encompasses billing and settlement, right? This is not every kind of agreement. For example, a participating generator agreement, while that's an agreement with the ISO, doesn't have anything to do, doesn't directly control billing and settlement. A participating generator needs a scheduling coordinator, for example. But of these certain kinds of agreements, if a market participant has more than one of the agreements will be designated to govern all billing, settlement, and payment. This is explained in section 2.2 of the draft final proposal. Essentially why? Well, the first and main reason is to give the ISO in a market participant bankruptcy the best possible argument and the best possible position to exercise recoupment as opposed to set-off. And the difference, and if this is a situation where a bankrupt debtor may owe money to the market and at the same time is due credits, perhaps, arguably under another contract. If the offsetting debits and credits or offsetting payments in two different directions are under different contracts, the legal doctrine that applies is set-off. Set-off is really inconvenient because it requires bankruptcy court approval, and that can take some time, and that would make it in all cases or many cases difficult to pay the market in full on time. Recoupment can apply when there is one single contract that governs these. There are more requirements, but we want to have the best possible argument for recoupment. That's the core reason. Another reason, it's possible someday, you get somebody who's a market participant goes bankrupt, it becomes contentious, or they're not necessarily trying to continue business with the ISO. If they have charges under, or they're in a positive position under one agreement and a negative position under another, they may want the money that they're due and try to reject the contract that's negative, and that's something we want to avoid. And so having all billing, payment, and settlement under one contract, we believe provides you all a lot of advantages. Now, this change, I want to say, the change is meant to be entirely legal. The only effect we're going for here, and we'll talk through the language, is to control which agreement legally governs the cash flow. It's not intended to change anything you do dealing with the market, not SCIDs, BAIDs, scheduling process, anything else. That's what we're going for. Let's actually walk through this language and show you what we meant or how it's supposed to work. I found this helpful myself. I'm not going to, I even spotted potential further improvements here, but let's see what you've got. The first part of this language, I got 4 slides here. The first two sentences? Yeah, 2 sentences. This just sets it up. I'm not going to read every word here, but the idea is to say this applies to entities that have more than one agreement that govern billing, payment, and settlement, and it says what those are, and then it defines them in this section as billing and payment agreements. It's just clearing the brush, laying a foundation for the rule. Then there's a little more context for the rule. This is part 2 of the 4. It says that one of those agreements will be designated to govern all settlements, and that we'll get to billing and payment next, but it's whether those settlements are under Section 11, Section 29, which is the EIM, Section 33, which is EDAM, and all billing and payment arising from those settlements. So we're again, with this brick 2 in the foundation for the rule, saying what's going to happen. Whoops. Did I just do that? Oh dear. No? All right. That should say part 3. Here's the rule, or here's the big hook. We want to make sure that the requirement to pay is incorporated in every agreement with the ISO. Now, that's probably not a problem with scheduling coordinator agreements, which, as far as or at least off the top of my head, I'd say they incorporate the entire tariff. But what about EIM scheduling coordinator agreements, CRR entity agreements? I know they don't incorporate the whole tariff. And so if for some reason one of those was designated as the controlling agreement, we want to make sure that it's clear that that agreement incorporates the obligation to pay all charges. And those agreements all, as I understand it, incorporate Section 11. And so that's the purpose of this rule, is to make sure the obligation to pay is in all the agreements. And then, finally, this is part 4. This is the rule. Which agreement is it? It's the agreement that appears, all the agreements they have, the agreement that appears first on the list. If they have more than one of the same kind of agreement, it's the first executed agreement. So that's supposed to designate a rule. And then there is, this is part 5, there's a catch-all at the end to make sure that nothing we've done here unintentionally has another effect on those agreements. Those are the mechanics. That's what we're going for, and bear with me. Oh, good. I see a comment. Sound is cutting in and out. Let me know if there's any. I'll repeat the last bit. Thomas, is sound any better? I don't think I was going away from the Polycom here. In any event, this is still the same. I'm not seeing this comment from anyone else, though. I wonder if it must be his system, yeah. All right, then let's proceed. Stop here and ask if there are any questions on proposed section 1129.2, and if you have been procrastinating on reading it, I hope that helps you read it, think harder, and please, in all these, please read skeptically. I know it's easy to look at it from the standpoint of your operations right now, but remember that all of us will, someday, in the worst case, there'll be an army of bankruptcy lawyers poring over these provisions, looking for flaws, trying to make life hard for all of us here except for one company, and you don't know whether that's your company. So read it skeptically. Let's make sure we've got this stuff right, and we'll put that day off. We'll put off that day. Okay, last part.
If you're not, I just wanted to make a note that if you're not seeing the raise hand icon, it's not at the very bottom of your screen. It's on the right. At the very bottom, there's a participant. There's a little button to open the participant panel, and it'll be on the right, about halfway down, right at the bottom of that participant panel, to raise your hand, and then we can call on you. Thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, that's no, good timing. That is all I have by way of highlighting the key themes here, trying to get you thinking about it. Are there
We do have
any...
a hand from Bonnie.
Yes. Oh, fantastic. Good morning, Bonnie.
Morning, you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Bonnie Blair, I work with the Six Cities group. Question in section 11.1, little a, little 2I, there's a reference that the changes don't apply to transactions prior to September 1st of 2012. I don't know whether there's any way there could be still open invoices. I guess there probably could be. But I didn't see anything explaining that sort of demarcation in the issue paper, and I wanted to ask about that.
Okay. Let me try to do this. I want to get this language up so we can all see it first. Let's try again. Okay.
And you can zoom in on your screen, Dan, and then everyone individually, the controls at the very top above the screen share, you can also individually zoom in if it's still a little too small.
Okay, Bonnie, are you seeing on your screen the language that you just mentioned?
Well, I have to zoom and try zooming. A2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yes, there it is. It's, yeah.
All right.
It's under little Romanet 2. There.
First of all, a good catch for everyone. For context here, this is the moved wholesale central counterparty rule. It had been in 1129, but because it relates not only to billing and payment, but also to settlement, we moved it up to 11.1. And Bonnie is noticing, thank you, that at the time, I think we'll have to think about this one. Thank you for flagging it. At the time of the central counterparty rule, the rule was it only applied going forward, and because at that point we still had, you know, I'm not going to name them, but a couple proceedings about old trade dates. Now that I think your question is, or one way to think of it is, now that those are gone, can we just get rid of this language and simplify the rule? Is that fair?
I guess so. I mean, yes, or I mean, the ones that come to mind that conceivably there could still be outstanding issues is the energy, you know, the energy crisis can of worms. I honestly couldn't say whether everything has finally been put to bed there. I think there's at least one proceeding that's still going. But
yeah, one or at least one. You know what? We'll think about this one hard offline. It's a good point. If we and also any other implications, but yeah, there's room. There's definitely the possibility that we could improve the clarity here and simplify it by deleting that. But I don't know I don't know and wouldn't want to give the answer off the top of my head.
I think that's completely fair, and yeah, thinking about what conceivably could bubble up, but yeah, and then the second part, you know, governed by the terms that were in place at the time, that is a little bit open-ended, I guess.
Um,
It makes my head hurt to think about trying to, go back and deal with something that happened in, 2001. But
uh, me too. All right, thank you. We will think about that, and we may puzzle through it with you offline, but that's a great catch. Thank you for reading it carefully. And Bonnie, do you have anything else?
I don't think so at this point. I mean, everything else. Well, I guess one question is, and maybe this is on the initiative page, and I'm just not remembering it. Have these revisions? Well, do they have to go to the Board of Governors? And if so, have they gone to the Board of Governors, or is that yet to come?
The provisions don't. In the ordinary practice related to tariff amendments, the board approves these at a policy level, and that was done last November. It has been my delay. It's taken a long time trying to get this language right and do everything. That's why people may have forgotten about this. In fact, a guy who frequently participates in these told me he'd forgotten all about this initiative. So
I had too. I had as well, and that's why I kind of wasn't up to speed on the status.
So, yep. Sorry, that's the delay is my responsibility. I hope the benefit is I found everything that needed to be found here to correct.
I think that's all I had, Dan. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Elena, is there anyone else in the queue?
No one else in the queue.
All right. I think that we have a few more slides. Don't hesitate to raise your hand. All right. If you are listening here today, or maybe the recording, because you want some background and you're planning to go through it carefully, we'd really appreciate it if you do that. That would be helpful. Please don't forget about the guide to the draft tariff language that is posted on the initiative page along with the tariff language. It's meant to help you find the red lines related to a specific topic. So even if you are only focused on, an important a topic or two that is important to your organization, it'll help you. It's meant to help you find that, or at least find the core provisions. It tracks language from the draft final proposal section to the red line tariff sections. Next steps in this venture. Comments are due at the end of the day, October 3rd. I think that's 2 weeks from now. There is a link to how you provide comments. If you have any questions later between now and October 3rd, please email me. I actually, sometimes, like Bonnie said, it's really hard to think about these old provisions or what the rules used to be, but I kind of enjoy it, sadly enough. So email me and we'll work through these to make sure they're right. If you have questions about how to submit comments, email ISO Stakeholder Affairs. So that's comments on this provision. After comments are submitted, we expect to file the amendment on October 11th, possibly October 10th, and then the phase 2 stakeholder process will begin soon. That the core topic there, which is one that was included in our discussions last fall, has to do with measures to enhance the ISO's visibility into the financial condition of load-serving entities that aren't scheduling coordinators. And we'll have some proposals there, and we will have several other small enhancements that we discovered, in the process of reviewing this language and in the earlier stakeholder policy process. Elena, I'm going to hand, it looks like I should hand this back to you for a few more slides before we finish.
Thank you so much, Jan. And thank you everybody for joining this discussion. We just had a few stakeholder affairs type slides here. So there's a new Energy Matters blog that was posted about the new tools and data to support the ISO's interconnection process. There's also going to be a training video that's posted about that GRIP tool, the Grid Unity tool, and some other ones here. So you've got some links. The next slide is going to be just a reminder about our stakeholder registration to register if you haven't done so yet, and about our new policy initiative timeline where you can see kind of a bird's eye view, and there's a link here for if you want to see kind of where the initiatives are and from a high level. And that's all from me. Thank you so much for everyone that joined, and thank you, Jan, for presenting and going over this so thoroughly.
All right. Thank you, Elena. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for your attention to this.